Welcome back to Psychology Central. We will now be talking to a supporter of the world-famous psychologist Stanley Milgram. Milgram focused a lot of his research on obedience, and while his experiment did raise a lot of ethical concerns, it also provided some answers to a question that's been on a lot of psychologists' minds. Does personality or situation affect obedience levels? Can we please welcome Owen Smythe?
Hello. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on here. I do personally believe that Milgram's study was very beneficial towards psychological studies on obedience and how it can cause harm to people, despite the many ethical issues surrounding it.
Now, it's been debated that personality has an effect on obedience. Do you agree?
To a certain extent, I do. After all, 15 of the 40 participants involved did not go up to the maximum 450 volts, which could show that they have a different personality trait that made them not want to obey the orders as much as other people. And some participants were clearly distressed, some showing signs of giggling or, just sweating, anything like that, which shows that they could be feeling sympathetic towards the Confederate participant who was in there. And one person who disobeyed was a pastor, and another one was someone who had grown up in Nazi Germany. And some of these personality traits could have been the reason as to why they did not obey.
And for the people who went through with it, do you think it affected them mentally in any way?
I personally do not believe, because Milgram, or at least his assistants, performed psychiatric tests on the participants a year later, and none of them showed any signs of long-term mental problems, which could show that the pros definitely outweigh the cons in this experiment.
So it's possible that personality can affect obedience, but what about situation? Surely if a person was told to do something immoral, they wouldn't obey, despite who the authority figure was.
I personally disagree. I do not think obedience has any effect on this experiment, because the people knew they were doing something bad. They could clearly hear Mr. Wallace screaming and begging them to stop, and yet they still chose to obey, even though they knew they were doing a bad thing, because they could potentially have killed him.
But don't you think that that was them feeling like they were forced to? Like they had no other choice? Because it was discovered that there was as many as 18 verbal prods to continue. It was almost as if they were forced into doing this job.
Well, they knew they could stop at any time. It's just that they felt pressured into doing so by this authority figure. But they still knew they were doing something bad. And if situation did have an effect on it, then these people would have clearly stopped the moment they heard that Mr. Wallace was in distress.
Has there been any experiences in history that supports this?
I do believe so. There was the case of Adolf Eichmann in Nazi Germany, who was responsible for the creation or formation of the idea of the final solution, which led to over 10 million people, including 6 million Jews, being killed during the Holocaust. And at the Nuremberg trials, he does claim that he was only following orders, which shows that if he knew he was doing something bad, surely he would have stopped, but he wasn't, because he felt pressured into doing so by this authority figure.
So, to summarise, situation does not have a visible effect on obedience, but personality does. Thank you for being on the show, Owen Smythe.
Thank you.
This has been Psychology Central. Thank you and goodbye.